Chapter 1.1 The Plight of the Individual in Modern Society. What will the future bring? From time immemorial, this question has occupied men's minds, though not always to the same degree. Historically, it is chiefly in times of physical and political, economical and spiritual distress that men's eyes turn with anxious hope to the future. When anticipations, utopias, and apocalyptic visions multiply. One thinks, for instance, of the geolastic expectations of the Augustan age at the beginning of the Christian era, or the changes in spirit of the West accompanied by the end of the first millennium. Today, at the end of the second millennium draws near, we are living in an age filled with apocalyptic images of universal destruction. What is the significance of that split, symbolized by the Iron Curtain, which divides humanity into two halves? What will become of civilization, of man himself, if the hydrogen bombs begin to go off? Or is it the spiritual and moral darkness of state absolutism should spread over Europe? We have no reason to take this threat lightly. Everywhere in the West there are subversive minorities who, sheltered by our humanitarianism and our sense of justice, hold the incendiary torches ready, and with nothing to stop the spread of their ideas except the critical reason of a single, fairly intelligent, mentally stable stratum of the population. One should not, however, overestimate the thickness of this stratum. It varies from country to country, and in accordance with national temperament. Also, it is regionally dependent on public education, and is subject to the influence of acutely disturbing factors of a political and economical nature. Taking plebiscites as a criterion, one could, on an optimistic estimate, put its upper limit at about 40% of the electorate. A rather more pessimistic view would not be unjustified either, since the gift of reason and critical reflection is not one of man's outstanding peculiarities, and even where it exists, it proves to be wavering and inconstant, the more so, as a rule, the bigger political groups are. The mass crushes out the insight and reflection that are still possible with the individual, and this necessarily leads to doctrinaire and authoritarian tyranny if the ever-constitutional state should succumb to a fit of weakness. Rational arguments can be conducted with some prospect of success, only so long as the emotionality of a given situation does not exceed a certain critical degree. If the effective temperature rises above this level, the possibility of reasons having any effect ceases, and its place is taken by slogans and chimerial wish fantasies. That is to say, a sort of collective possession results, which rapidly develops into a psychic epidemic. In this state, all the elements whose existence is merely tolerated as a social under the rule of reason comes to the top. Some individuals are by no means rare curiosities to be met with only in prisons and lunatic asylums. For every manifest case of insanity there are, in my estimation, at least 10 latent cases who seldom get to the point of breaking out openly, but whose views and behaviour, for all their appearance of normality, are influenced by unconsciously morbid and perverse factors. There are, of course, no medical statistics on the frequency of latent psychosis for understandable reasons. But even if the number should amount to less than 10 times, that of the manifest psychosis and of manifest criminality, the relatively small percentage of the population figures they represent is more than compensated for by the peculiar dangerousness of this people. Their mental state is that of a collectively excited group ruled by affective judgments and wish fantasies. In a state of collective possession, they are the adapted ones, and consequently, they feel quite at home in it. They know from their own experience the language of these conditions, and they know how to handle them. Their chimerial ideas, unborn by fanatical resentment, appeal to the collective irrationality and find fruitful soil there, for they express all those motives and resentments which lurk in more normal people under the cloak of reason and insight. They are, therefore, despite their small number in comparison with the population as a whole, dangerous as sources of infection, precisely because the so-called normal person possesses only a limited degree of self-knowledge. Most people confuse self-knowledge with the knowledge of their conscious ego personalities. Anyone who has ego consciousness at all takes it for granted, for he knows himself. But the ego knows only its own contents, not the unconscious and its contents. People measure their self-knowledge by what the average person in their social environment knows of himself, but not the real psychic facts, which are for the most part hidden from them. In this respect, the psyche behaves like a body with its psychological and anatomical structure, of which the average person knows very little too. Although he lives in it and with it, most of it is totally unknown to the layman, and special scientific knowledge is needed to acquaint consciousness with what is known of the body, not to speak of all that is not known, which also exists. What is commonly called self-knowledge is therefore a very limited knowledge, most of it dependent on social factors of what goes on in the human psyche. Hence, one is always coming up against the prejudice that such and such a thing does not happen with us, or in our family, or among our friends and acquaintances. And on the other hand, one meets with equally illusionary assumptions about the alleged presence of qualities which merely serve to cover up the facts of the case. In this broad belt of unconsciousness, which is immune to conscious criticism and control, we stand defenseless, open to all kinds of influences and psychic infections. As with all dangers, we can guard against the risk of psychic infection only when we know what is attacking us, how, where, and when the attack will come. Since self-knowledge is a matter of getting to know the individual facts, theories help very little in this respect.